This week at Interior. Secretary Haaland and Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs Brian Newland visited the Hopi tribe in Arizona this week, where they announced $72 million from President Biden's Investing in America agenda to help tribal communities electrify their homes. Under the Office of Indian Affairs Tribal Electrification Program, 21 tribes will receive financial and technical assistance in this first round of funding. In New Mexico, the leaders visited the White Mountain Apache tribe and the Pueblo of Zuni, where they highlighted how historic resources from the President's Investing in America agenda are supporting indigenous communities. Secretary Haaland and U.S. Geological Survey Director Dave Applegate joined members of the Federal Advisory Council for Climate Adaptation Science for the Council's inaugural meeting in Washington, D.C. Created to help address the growing impacts of the climate crisis, the Council will bridge the work of USGS's Climate Adaptation Science Centers, which bring a regional focus to the Department's climate action, with natural and cultural resource management partners nationwide. The Council will also be crucial in ensuring that historically marginalized and underserved communities don't face the challenge of adaptation alone. Secretary Haaland delivered remarks this week at a White House roundtable on increasing capital access for tribal nations, which gathered leaders from across the Biden-Harris administration and the philanthropic and financial services sectors. The secretary highlighted how Interior is acting on President Biden's Executive Order 14112, which calls on federal agencies to ensure funding for tribes is accessible, flexible, and equitable. Acting Deputy Secretary Laura Daniel Davis and Biden-Harris administration leaders this week announced a significant milestone in the ongoing efforts to protect the stability and sustainability of the Colorado River system and strengthen water security in the West. Thanks to historic investments from President Biden's Investing in America agenda, including 3 new water savings agreements in California, the department successfully staved off the immediate collapse of this precious resource and closed out its short-term efforts to protect water levels in Lakes Mead and Powell through 2026. The department is continuing to work with tribes, basin states, and other parties across the Colorado River Basin on long-term conservation efforts. The Departments of the Interior and Justice this week released their response to the Not Invisible Act Commission's recommendations on how to combat the crisis of missing and murdered indigenous peoples. Secretary Haaland, who championed the law creating the commission, hailed its work to identify recommendations created by Indian country for Indian country. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service this week reported that the wild population of Mexican wolves grew in 2023 for the 8th consecutive year, the longest streak since recovery efforts began in 1998. The 2023 population census revealed a minimum of 257 Mexican wolves distributed across Arizona and New Mexico, a 6% increase over the 2022 count. The National Park Service this week announced the projected peak bloom date for the cherry blossoms at the National Mall and Memorial Parks in Washington, D.C., sometime between March 23rd and March 26th. Which is 8 days earlier than average thanks to a mostly mild winter. More than 1.5 million visitors turn out every year to take in the blossoms and the National Cherry Blossom Festival, which runs from March 20th through April 14th. This week, Secretary Haaland interviewed White House Counsel and Environmental Quality Chair Brenda Mallory on Instagram Live to mark Women's History Month and discuss how Interior and CEQ work together to address challenges like environmental injustice across our country. Since 2021, the National Park Service has invested more than $19 million in infrastructure and preservation projects for parks commemorating women across the nation. Interior has also awarded $2.1 million in Historic Preservation Fund grants for sites that are helping tell women's history. And our social media picture of the week, this stunning image of killer whales swimming in Puget Sound off the coast of San Juan Islands National Monument in Washington. It's just one of a number of breathtaking sights you can find here, along with exhilarating recreational opportunities and unforgettable memories. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That's This Week at Interior.